I want you to imagine something for a second. Let's say you decide you want to learn how to play chess,
Okay.
but you don't just, casually pick it up. You completely obsess over it.
Right, like a deep dive.
Exactly. You memorize every single rule. You study the Sicilian defense, the Queen's Gambit, all those legendary Grandmaster games from like the last century.
You've got all the theory down.
Right. You can recite the exact mathematical probability of winning from literally any position on the board. You possess this encyclopedic, completely flawless data bank of the game in your head. But here is the catch. You have never actually sat across from a human being and played. You've never felt that very specific, terrifying pressure of a ticking clock. You've never felt the psychological weight of your opponent just staring you down, or that sudden crushing realization that you've just, blundered your queen.
Yeah, that stomach drop.
Yes. You have all the information in the world, but you possess absolutely zero of the actual lived experience.
I mean, it's the ultimate modern trap, isn't it? Totally. We constantly confuse the possession of data with, the state of actually being transformed by that data. Having the map of a mountain range, It doesn't mean your legs are strong enough to climb the actual terrain.
Yeah.
I mean, one is entirely theoretical and the other is a physical, visceral reality.
And bridging that massive gap between knowing the rules and actually experiencing the reality is exactly what we are unpacking today. So, welcome to this deep dive.
It's a great topic.
It really is. Today we have a truly fascinating stack of source material in front of us. We are looking at this theological and philosophical manuscript titled Mersht, which translates from Arabic to guide. And, whether you consider yourself deeply interested in theology or psychology or honestly just the fundamental mechanics of how human beings actually change their behavior.
Which is everyone, hopefully.
Right, exactly. This text is just a goldmine. The mission for our conversation today is to explore the manuscript's central, really provocative thesis.
Which is quite bold.
It is. It's the idea that raw information, rule books, intellectual data, they are completely fundamentally insufficient for true human transformation.
Yeah, the manuscript diagnoses a very specific chronic human condition. It argues that true understanding, the actual purification of the self,
what they call tazkiyah.
Exactly, tazkiyah.
Right.
That purification and a real vibrating connection to the divine, it cannot be extracted from a textbook or a lecture.
You can't just read your way to enlightenment.
No, you cannot simply read your way into spiritual elevation. Instead, the author presents this framework that requires a living, breathing guide, a murshid.
Okay.
And it emphasizes the sheer, almost physics-like power of spiritual companionship to literally rewrite our internal operating systems.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what immediately grabbed me about this manuscript is how it takes this ancient spiritual wisdom and maps it perfectly onto what we would now call like behavioral psychology.
It really did.
It starts by just taking a sledgehammer to this massive illusion we all carry around in the 21st century. The illusion that the human mind is the ultimate authority.
The sole driver of change.
Yes. That our brain is the only thing that matters.
Well, the text establishes a very sharp, uncompromising boundary right out of the gate between outward submission and inward faith.
Right, the Islam versus Iman distinction.
Exactly. In the Islamic framework discussed by the author, these are categorized as Islam, the public actions, and Iman, the inward conviction. The manuscript cites a tradition where the Prophet Muhammad explicitly states that Islam is public, but Iman is in the heart.
And the gesture he makes here is so important.
It's the most striking detail, the physical gesture that accompanied the statement. The Prophet pointed directly to his own chest, his heart, and said, "Taqwa is here."
Taqwa, meaning like consciousness of God.
Yes, taqwa being this profound, vibrating consciousness, reverence, or awe of the divine. He didn't point to his head,
Right.
He pointed to his chest.
I feel like that is a massive paradigm shift, especially for us living in an era where we practically worship the brain.
Oh, absolutely.
We think if we just read enough articles or listen to the right deep dives or download the perfect productivity app, we'll somehow become fundamentally better people.
The brain as the savior.
Exactly. But the text is arguing that the mind is essentially just a processor. It processes the what.
Mm-hmm.
It can categorize the laws, the theology, the lists of what is permitted and what is forbidden. But the heart,
It's different.
the text treats the heart as an actual perceptual organ. It's the only thing capable of processing the why and the actual feeling of the truth.
That's a crucial distinction. The mind is a sorting mechanism, but the heart is the seat of perception and state.
Yeah.
The manuscript synthesizes this limitation of the intellect by bringing in a very famous narrative known as the Hadith of Gabriel.
Oh, right. This is a core text.
It is. In this account, the angel Gabriel comes in the form of a man and questions the prophet about the different tiers of faith. After establishing the foundational rules and beliefs,
What?
exactly, the
Huh.
what, he then asks about a concept called Ihsan. And the prophet replies that Ihsan is to worship God as if you see him, for even if you do not see him, he sees you.
Wow.
Now, I want to pause and look at the cognitive leap required there. You cannot intellectualize the feeling of being seen by the divine.
No, you really can't.
That is a state of being. That is a frequency. The author is pointing out that reaching this tier, this Ihsan, it requires a sensory spiritual awakening that the brain simply cannot compute on its own. It's totally beyond the realm of logic.
Let me try to ground this with an analogy, because I was thinking about this. Is this essentially like reading a highly detailed, peer-reviewed textbook on the physics of riding a bicycle?
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. Like you can sit in your room and memorize the gyroscopic effects, the center of gravity, the friction coefficients of the tires.
You know the math perfectly.
You can get a perfect score on the written exam. But the second you get on the actual bike, your brain's knowledge is completely useless. You're going to fall over and scrape your knee.
Because your body doesn't know it.
Exactly. The only way to actually learn is to experience that visceral, undeniable feeling of balance you get when someone, a guide, holds the seat for you, right? And they run alongside you until your body just gets it.
Right, you need that external support to find the internal state.
But my question is, if the mind is just the textbook, how does this manuscript say we actually bridge that gap? I mean, how do you go from acing the written test on theology to actually feeling the balance on the bike?
Well, the author's answer is that you absolutely cannot bridge it alone.
Okay.
The text references another tradition stating that there is a piece of flesh in the human body. If it is sound, the whole body is sound, and if it is corrupt, the whole body is corrupt, and that is the heart.
The heart again.
Always the heart. The author makes the point that knowing the stark difference between right and wrong, the halal and haram, is intellectually pretty easy. Black and white are obvious. Don't steal, don't kill.
Sure.
But life isn't lived in the black and white. It is lived in the gray areas.
And the messy middle.
Navigating the nuances of your own intentions, your ego, your subtle pride, your sincerity, that requires a pure heart, not just a sharp brain.
Because the brain will trick you.
Exactly. A sharp brain is actually dangerous. It can rationalize and justify a terrible action, but a pure heart will feel the dissonance. It will feel the spiritual sickness of the action, regardless of the mind's excuses.
Think about your own life right now as you're listening to this. We are all drowning in this ocean of information overload. We suffer from this daily.
Oh, universally?
We know exactly what we should do.
Right.
We know we should eat healthier. We know we should put our phones in another room at night. We know we should be more patient with our families, focus on our work.
The lists are endless.
The data is all perfectly filed away in our brains.
Right.
But we constantly fail to execute it because we lack the internal state to carry it out.
We have the rule book, but we don't have the engine.
Right. What I find so compelling here is that this text is offering a deeply historical, spiritual solution to an incredibly modern, universal human condition.
It is a condition of spiritual lethargy. And we have to look closely at how the manuscript addresses this lethargy because, frankly, it doesn't pull any punches.
No, it does not.
This brings us to a very stark concept in the text regarding the cosmic hierarchy and the whole purpose of human creation.
Okay.
The author outlines that humans are the most honored of all creations. We are given immense knowledge, intellect, and authority over the earth. We are placed at the very pinnacle of the hierarchy.
Right.
However, this honor is not an unconditional lifetime guarantee. It is highly, highly conditional.
Wait, I have to push back a little there. Conditional on what? Because modern humanism, the way we're raised today, it teaches us that human dignity is just an inherent baseline. You are born human, therefore you have the ultimate dignity, full stop.
Right.
Are you saying this text argues that our dignity can be revoked?
The text argues exactly that.
Wow.
It asserts that human dignity is conditional on fulfilling the purpose of creation, which the text identifies with the term bandagi.
Bandagi.
Yeah. Now, Bendagi is often translated simply as worship, but that's way too narrow. It implies pure, devoted servitude, like a complete orientation of the soul toward the divine.
So it's not just checking boxes.
Not at all. It's not just about going through the physical motions of daily rituals. It's a state of being. And the manuscript issues a stark warning drawn directly from the Quran.
Okay, what is it?
It says that if humans abandon this core purpose, if they lose this internal orientation of Bendagi, they're described as being like cattle, nay, even more astray.
Like cattle. I mean, that is an incredibly aggressive demotion.
It is.
From the pinnacle of the cosmos down to livestock. I can see a lot of people finding that deeply offensive.
It's meant to be a shock to the system, but we have to ask why the metaphor of cattle is used.
Okay, why?
Think about the life of a grazing animal. They eat, they sleep, they reproduce, they consume resources, and they follow the herd.
Right.
Their entire existence is dictated by biological appetite and environmental reflex. There is no higher consciousness, no self-interrogation, no transcendent purpose.
They're just living on instinct.
Exactly. The author emphasizes this because it shatters that modern notion you mentioned, that dignity is just passive. In this framework, human dignity is active.
You have to earn it, in a way.
Without that spiritual connection, the text argues that our sensory organs, our eyes, our ears, our hearts, they become spiritually useless. We might physically see the world, but we are utterly blind to the reality behind it. We are just sophisticated animals consuming inputs.
What genuinely terrifies me about this is that the text argues it's not just secular, everyday life like working a 9-to-5 and watching Netflix that can drop us into this cattle state.
Right, it goes deeper.
It points out that even religious rituals themselves can become part of the grazing.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are just a brain operating a body without that spiritual heart connection we talked about, prayer doesn't actually stop you from being petty or cruel when you leave the room.
It's just gymnastics at that point.
Yeah. Fasting just makes you physically hungry and irritable. It doesn't bring actual empathy or piety. And giving to charity just feels like a painful tax on your bank account.
Yeah.
Not a liberation from greed. You're just a highly functioning robot going through a prescribed checklist, entirely hollow inside.
Precisely. The ritual becomes a performance rather than a transformation.
Wow.
The outward forms are there, the Islam, but the inward essence, the Iman, is dead. You are basically maintaining the shell of the vehicle while the engine rusts away.
If all our routines, even the supposedly sacred ones, can just degrade into this hollow, cattle-like grind, I feel like the system is rigged.
It can feel that way.
If my own mind is constantly tricking me into thinking I'm doing fine just because I'm checking boxes, how can I possibly pull myself out of it? Reading another book clearly won't work because my brain will just turn that into another checklist.
You've hit on the exact friction point the manuscript is trying to highlight.
Okay.
A closed system cannot fix itself when the mechanism of fixing is what's broken.
Right.
This is where the manuscript introduces the external catalyst. It brings in the absolute, non-negotiable necessity of suba.
So
Now, suba translates to companionship, company, or fellowship, but it's much deeper than just hanging out.
it's not just grabbing coffee with friends.
No, it's the intentional curation of who you physically and spiritually sit with. To explain the mechanics of this, the author cites a profoundly intuitive analogy from the prophetic traditions. The analogy of the perfume seller and the blacksmith.
Oh, I love this analogy so much because it bypasses all the dense theology and goes straight to everyday human experience.
It really does.
The text says a good companion is like sitting with a perfume seller. Even if you don't buy a single bottle of perfume, even if you don't exchange a single word about the ingredients, just by standing in that shop, the fragrance attaches to your clothes.
You absorb it.
You walk out smelling fantastic, strictly by virtue of the environment you placed yourself in.
And conversely, the bad companion is likened to a blacksmith.
Right.
Even if you don't touch the anvil, even if you don't get burned by the sparks, just by sitting in that forge, you are going to walk away smelling like smoke, sweat, and soot.
Yeah.
It permeates you entirely, regardless of your conscious intention or your willpower to resist it.
It's the physics of companionship.
Yeah.
If we want to look at this through a modern lens, we're talking about emotional contagion.
Exactly.
We're talking about mirror neurons in the brain that automatically fire to mimic the states of the people around us.
We are wired to sync up.
We are. And the text grounds this incredibly deep psychological reality in a historical story that I think everyone listening can intimately relate to. It's the story of a man named Hanzala.
A classic narrative.
Yeah. Now, Hanzala was not a casual observer. He was a scribe, a close, elite companion of the Prophet. And one day, another elite companion, Abu Bakr, sees him in the street and asks how he's doing. And Hanzala just breaks down.
He's devastated.
He says, Hanzala has become a hypocrite.
It's a moment of severe, agonizing existential crisis. He isn't using the word hypocrite lightly here.
No, not at all.
In their vocabulary, a hypocrite is someone destined for the lowest depths of hell because their outside doesn't match their inside. Abu Bakr is shocked by this confession. He asks, "What are you talking about?"
And Hanzala explains his psychological state so perfectly. He says, look, when we're sitting with the Prophet and he reminds us of heaven and hell, my heart gets so incredibly soft, it's like I could physically see the afterlife right in front of my eyes.
He's at the peak of Ihsan.
The spiritual clarity is unbelievable. But then I leave. I go home to my wife, I play with my kids, I go check on my farm, my business, and suddenly I forget it all.
Normal life happens.
The feeling just vanishes. The mundane world takes over. He felt that because his spiritual state fluctuated so wildly depending on his location, he must be a total fake.
Yeah.
His mind told him, if you really believed this, you'd feel it all the time.
Which is exactly how our modern minds work. We demand consistency as proof of authenticity.
Yes.
So Abu Bakr actually relates to this feeling, and they both go to the Prophet in a state of panic to confess this hypocrisy.
They're freaking out.
Totally. Now, let's look at how a purely dogmatic or intellectual approach might have handled this. A rigid theologian might have scolded them. Your faith is weak, you need to study more, you need to try harder, memorize more verses.
Right, do better.
But the Prophet does not condemn Hanzala. Instead, he acts as the ultimate spiritual psychologist. He validates human nature.
I love that.
He swears by God and says, if you were to remain always in the state you are in when you are with me, the angels would shake your hands on your beds and in the streets.
Meaning you'd be angels yourself.
Exactly. But then he adds a crucial balancing statement. Oh, Hanzala, there's a time for this and a time for that.
I can't express what a relief it is to hear that. Even the best of the best, the people literally documenting the revelation, couldn't hold the state 24/7.
Yeah.
It normalizes the fluctuation we all feel.
It absolutely normalizes it. But the deeper theological and psychological point the author of the manuscript extracts from this narrative is paramount.
What's the takeaway?
It proves unequivocally that it was the environment, the sheer physical and spiritual presence of the Prophet, the Suba, that was generating that elevated spiritual frequency, not Hanzala's isolated individual willpower.
Right.
When he was in the company of the perfume seller, he smelled the perfume. When he left the shop, the scent naturally faded over time as it was exposed to the elements of normal life.
Because that's how perfume works.
Exactly. The text uses this to establish an immutable spiritual law. Your internal state is dictated by your external company. You cannot sustain a high spiritual frequency in a vacuum. You need the proximity of a guide.
Think about this in the context of your own friendships right now. Think about how you act, how you speak, what you joke about, even how you posture your physical body when you are hanging out with your most ambitious, disciplined, inspiring friends.
You sit up straighter.
You do. Now contrast that with the heavy, lethargic feeling you get after spending 3 hours with your most cynical, complaining, toxic acquaintances.
You feel drained.
We like to think we are these impenetrable fortresses of individuality, but we are highly permeable creatures. We absorb the psychological atmosphere around us like sponges.
Completely.
What this manuscript does is take that undeniable psychological fact, emotional contagion, and elevate it to a fundamental spiritual law. It says you must curate your spiritual environment if you want to survive the gravity of your own ego.
And the text pushes this idea of permeability even further. It argues that a true spiritual guide, a murshid, doesn't just pass on data or lecture you or give you better habits.
Okay.
They transform the heart through their sheer presence. The manuscript refers to this as the power of the transformative glance. The environment itself does the heavy lifting, bypassing the defensive intellect entirely.
This concept of bypassing the intellect leads to some of the most dramatic historical accounts in the text. Let's look at the story of Thuma bin Uthal.
Oh, this is a phenomenal story.
It's like a movie. Thuma was a powerful tribal leader, a king, essentially, and a bitter, sworn enemy of the Muslims. He had actual blood on his hands. He had tortured and killed Muslims. He gets captured by a patrol, and they blow him back to Medina.
Right.
And what do they do with this high-value prisoner of war? They don't throw him in a dungeon. They tie him to a pillar right inside the Prophet's mosque.
This is a deeply intentional choice. He is placed right in the epicenter of the community's spiritual life. He's immersed in the ecosystem.
Right. And over 3 days, the prophet walks up to him and simply asks, "What do you have to say, Thuma?"
Mm-hmm.
And Thuma, full of royal pride and defiance, basically gives a politician's answer. He says, "If you kill me, you kill a man whose blood will be avenged by my tribe. If you free me, I'll be a grateful ally. If you want money, name your ransom."
It's a purely transactional, worldly negotiation.
Exactly. Day 2 comes.
Yeah.
The prophet asks the same question. Thuma gives the exact same defiant answer. Day 3, same question, same answer. Now, notice what isn't happening.
No debate.
There's no theological debate. The prophet isn't arguing philosophy with him.
Mm-hmm.
He isn't trying to prove the oneness of God through logical syllogisms.
And this is the crucial mechanism the author highlights. After the 3rd day of this intellectual standoff, the prophet doesn't try to break his logic.
Right.
He simply orders his companions, release Thuma. He lets him go unconditionally. No ransom, no treaty.
And the result is staggering. Thuma walks out of the mosque, a free man. He goes to a nearby grove of palm trees, washes himself, and then walks right back into the mosque on his own free will and declares his faith.
Incredible.
He becomes a Muslim. But the reason he gives is what we need to look at. He looks at the prophet and explicitly says, and I'm paraphrasing the text here, "By God, there was no face on the face of the earth more hated to me than your face, but now it has become the most beloved face to me. There was no religion more hated to me than yours, and now it is the most beloved. There was no city more hated to me than yours, and now it is the most beloved."
The author analyzes this transformation deeply because it is the ultimate proof of his thesis. Thuma wasn't convinced by a logical argument.
His brain wasn't defeated.
Exactly. His brain wasn't defeated in a debate. He was convinced by exposure. For 3 days, tied to that pillar, he simply observed the prophetic environment.
The perfume shop.
Yes. He watched how the community interacted. He watched the people praying in unison. He observed the prophet's character, his mercy, his stillness. We were talking about mirror neurons earlier. Thumoma's internal state was being bombarded by a frequency of peace and submission bandagi that he had never encountered.
Wow.
The text argues that simply sitting in the presence of that light achieved what 1,000 intellectual debates or hours of physical torture could not. The purity of the environment literally overwrote his psychological programming of hatred.
It's the ultimate historical example of show, don't tell. The presence of the Murshid was the argument. And the text brings up another amazing example of this bypass mechanism. The story of Ubay bin Ka'b.
Another great one.
Now, Ubay wasn't an enemy. He was a brilliant companion, a master of the Quran. But he had a sudden, severe moment of doubt regarding the recitation. It was a purely intellectual stumbling block.
Right, a cognitive dissonance.
His brain got caught in a logical loop he couldn't escape. He goes to the prophet, and the prophet sees this heavy, dark doubt covering him. Does the prophet sit him down, pull out a whiteboard, and draw a diagram explaining the linguistics?
No, he doesn't.
No. According to the text, the prophet simply strikes Ubay on the chest. Ubay says he broke into a profound sweat and felt as if he were looking directly at God in fear and awe. The doubt vanished.
The author uses this incident to show that what we often perceive as an intellectual doubt is actually a disease of the heart masquerading as a question of the mind.
Oh, that's interesting.
The intellect is just generating the smoke, but the fire is in the chest.
Right.
The physical, spiritual intervention, the strike to the chest by a pure guide, it shattered the intellectual doubt instantly because it recalibrated his spiritual frequency. It bypassed the smoke and put out the fire.
I want to look at one more example from the text because it explains how this transformation changes behavior so effortlessly. There's the story of Kaysan, the wine merchant.
The economics of belief.
Yeah. He comes to Medina with a massive shipment of premium wine to sell. It's his livelihood. He approaches the prophet, completely unaware that alcohol has just been prohibited by revelation. The prophet tells him, "Kaysan, it has been forbidden."
Now, put yourself in his shoes.
Right. You would expect a merchant to argue, "Can I just sell this last batch? What about my sunk cost? Can I sell it to the non-Muslims passing through?"
A purely rational economic mind would immediately seek a loophole to mitigate the financial loss. The brain is an expert at protecting its own interests.
Exactly. But what does Kaysan do? He doesn't argue for a single second. He walks over to his incredibly valuable jars of wine, grabs them, and physically smashes them in the street.
Just destroys his inventory.
He pours his entire fortune out into the dirt. The manuscript argues this wasn't an act of grinding, painful willpower. It wasn't him suppressing a terrible urge while gritting his teeth.
Yeah.
It was a result of a heart that had been so rapidly transformed by the company and the light of the prophet that the very idea of sin literally felt disgusting to him. His internal value system had been completely rewritten.
This is a profound psychological insight. The text suggests that true spiritual company doesn't just give you the muscular strength to fight your bad desires, it actually changes what you desire.
That is huge.
When the heart is purified through Suba, obedience stops being a chore. It stops being a checklist. It becomes your natural inclination. The struggle vanishes because the appetite has changed.
Let me bring back the bicycle analogy for a second. We've established that the guide holds the seat so you can feel the balance.
Right.
But what if you were completely lost? What if you've been riding your bike into a jerk wall for 20 years and the bike is mangled and you are bleeding out?
A total wreck.
What if you are so far gone in the wrong direction that you feel completely irredeemable? The manuscript addresses this extreme end of the spectrum with what I like to call the geography of mercy. It's the famous story of the man with 99 murders.
It is arguably one of the most profound narratives about the mechanics of grace in the entire tradition.
Yeah.
The text details a man from ancient times who had murdered 99 people. The psychological weight, the trauma, the sheer darkness of that is unfathomable. The spark of conscience remains.
Amazingly.
He seeks out the most knowledgeable person on earth to ask if repentance is even possible for him. He is directed to a monk, a devout, ascetic worshiper who spends his days in isolation. The killer confesses his 99 murders and asks, "Is there any repentance for me?"
I'm the monk.
The monk, looking at the sheer math of the crimes, looking purely at the law, says no.
Which, honestly, is the logical answer. If you kill 99 people, society says you're done. The justice system says you're done.
Right.
But the man is so driven by despair and rage at that absolute rejection that he draws his sword and kills the monk right there,
Yeah.
making it an even 100.
He hits absolute, undeniable rock bottom. He has killed the very person he went to for help.
Yeah.
But the spiritual itch, that tiny ember of the heart, is still there. He asks again who the most knowledgeable person on earth is, and this time he is directed to a scholar, a true person of knowledge and heart, not just isolated worship.
Okay.
He goes to the scholar, confesses to 100 murders, and asks if repentance is possible. And the scholar says, yes. Who can stand between a person and repentance?
Wow.
But notice what the scholar does next. He doesn't just give him a theological pardon and send him home. He gives him a physical, geographical prescription.
This is the key.
He tells the man he must leave his current town because it is an evil environment that facilitates his dark state, and he must migrate to a specific land where people are actively worshiping God and join them.
He tells him to change his company, get out of the blacksmith shop, because clearly you can't stop playing with the fire, and go find the perfume sellers. Go find the people who will hold the bike seat for you.
Exactly. Move toward the light.
So the man sets off. He leaves his town, walking toward this new land. But halfway there, right in the middle of the journey, he drops dead.
And here is where the manuscript pulls back the curtain on the cosmic reality, breaking down the climax of the story. The angels of mercy descend, and the angels of punishment descend, and they begin to argue over the soul.
It is a literal cosmic court case.
It is. The angels of punishment lay out the facts. He never did a single good deed in his life. He's a mass murderer of 100 people. The angels of mercy argue the counterpoint, but he came repenting, directing his heart toward God.
It's the ultimate showdown of action versus intention, the data versus the state of the heart.
To settle the dispute, God commands another angel to act as an arbitrator. The arbitrator gives a fascinating ruling. He says, measure the distance between the two lands. Whichever he is closer to, he belongs to them.
Okay.
So they measure the earth. And he is found to be just a handspan closer to the good land, the land of the righteous company. Therefore, the angels of mercy take him.
I really want you to think about what that implies for a second. The implication the text makes here is absolutely staggering.
It changes everything.
The man hadn't even done any good deeds yet. He hadn't prayed a single prayer. He hadn't fasted a single day. He hadn't paid any reparations to the families of his victims. His what was completely empty.
0 positive data points.
He had merely moved his physical body toward the company of the righteous. His trajectory was set. The text uses this story as ultimate proof that seeking out a guide, seeking out immersion in good spiritual company is an act so immensely powerful that the mere trajectory toward them, the mere effort to get into their orbit, guarantees divine mercy. even if you die trying to get there.
It perfectly illustrates that salvation in this framework is not a solitary, isolated achievement of willpower. It is deeply geographical and relational.
Relational, yes.
You have to migrate your heart and often your physical body toward the people of light. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Because I can hear a modern listener thinking, all right, I get it. The Prophet's company was clearly transformative. Sitting with saints in ancient times was great. But we live in the 21st century.
Right. I have Google.
Exactly. I don't need to walk across a desert to find knowledge. We have the Quran perfectly preserved in every language. We have thousands of volumes of hadith, perfectly authenticated, categorized, and searchable. We have the internet. I can literally download the entire corpus of Islamic theology, or any theology, onto my phone right now in 3 seconds. If I have all the instruction manuals, why do I still need a living guide today? Can't I just read the books and figure it out?
It is the single most common question of the modern era. We inherently trust systems and data more than we trust people.
Holy.
But the author of the manuscript anticipates this directly. He dedicates significant space to tackling the ultimate limit of the intellectual. The text answers this by asserting a foundational metaphor. Books are the map. The guide is the one who has actually walked the path.
Ooh, the map versus the guide.
A map can tell you there is a mountain at these coordinates, but a map cannot tell you how to survive the altitude sickness. A map cannot show you where the hidden crevices are that swallow people whole. Only a Sherpa, someone whose boots have touched the snow, can do that.
And the author makes a brilliant linguistic argument to back this up, pulling from the very first chapter of the Quran, Surah Fatiha. This is the prayer that Muslims recite multiple times every single day.
The core prayer.
In it, believers ask God, guide us to the straight path. But the text points out what comes immediately after that request. The Quran doesn't say the path of the rule book. It doesn't say the path of the abstract laws and theories.
No, it does.
It explicitly says the path of those you have favored, the prophets, the truthful, the martyrs, the righteous. The text argues that the Quran itself, the ultimate book, explicitly directs people to look for and follow people. The book points to the human being.
Because a path is defined by the footsteps of those who walk it. To reinforce this necessity of the human guide, the manuscript brings in the historical heavyweights. It looks at the giants of Islamic history to prove that intellect alone, no matter how vast, always hits a wall. The prime example the text explores is Imam Ghazali.
Oh, this is the perfect case study. If there was ever anyone in human history who could have read their way to enlightenment, it was Ghazali.
Absolutely. Imam Ghazali was a polymath of unparalleled genius in the 11th century. He mastered every conceivable science, jurisprudence, philosophy, logic, theology.
He was a rock star.
He really was. He became the head of the Nizamiya University in Baghdad, which was the equivalent of being the president of Oxford or Harvard for the entire Islamic world at the time. He had achieved the absolute pinnacle of academic, political, and intellectual success.
He had read all the books.
He had written the books that everyone else was reading.
And yet, despite having the biggest brain in the room, he hit a wall.
A profound, debilitating existential crisis. Despite all his monumental knowledge, he admitted in his autobiography that his heart was spiritually empty. He realized his intentions for teaching were mixed with pride and a desire for worldly fame. He knew the precise academic definitions of sincerity, piety, and humility, but he couldn't actually feel them.
The bicycle analogy again.
Yeah.
He knew the physics, couldn't ride the bike.
Exactly. He recognized that all his theoretical knowledge couldn't cure the diseases of his own ego. So what did the greatest academic in the world do?
What did he do?
He abandoned his prestigious post, gave away his wealth, left his family in the care of others, and went into seclusion. But more importantly, he went to sit at the feet of Sufi guides, the people of the heart.
He submitted himself.
He submitted his massive intellect to the spiritual training of a murshid. And he later wrote that it was only through their companionship and their experiential practices that he finally tasted the reality of the faith he'd been lecturing about for years.
That is staggering. The guy who literally wrote the encyclopedia on theology had to go find a mentor to learn how to actually experience it. It's like the chess grandmaster realizing he's never actually played a game.
Perfect parallel.
And it wasn't just him. The text points out that even the absolute founders of Islamic jurisprudence, the men who codified the laws that billions of people follow, humbled themselves before spiritual guides.
Right.
You have Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad. These are the titans of legal scholarship. And yet, Abu Hanifa famously said that if it weren't for the 2 years he spent sitting with his spiritual guide, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, Nu'man, his given name, would have perished.
Meaning his soul would have died.
He meant his soul would have been completely ruined by the arrogance of his own intellect.
This brings us to a critical warning in the manuscript. The author is warning us about the inherent danger of raw knowledge. Knowledge without spiritual purification, without tazkiyah, can actually be highly toxic.
Toxic knowledge.
Let's look at the etymology of tazkiyah. It comes from a root word meaning to grow or to purify, like pruning a plant so it can flourish, or filtering impurities out of water. If you don't engage in this pruning, knowledge breeds arrogance. It makes you a Pharisee. You become so obsessed with the letter of the law, the technicalities, that you lose the spirit of the law entirely.
You just use it as a weapon.
Exactly. You use your knowledge to judge others rather than fix yourself. The author notes a profound structural detail in the Quran. When it describes the mission of the prophet, it repeatedly lists purifying them before teaching them the book and wisdom. Purification is the prerequisite for knowledge.
Let's think about that in terms of a metaphor. If you pour pure, crystal clear water, which represents divine knowledge, into a dirty, mud-caked glass, which represents an arrogant, unpurified heart, the water instantly becomes dirty.
It's undrinkable.
You can't drink it. The guide, the murshid, is the one who helps you scrub the glass clean so the knowledge can actually benefit you. And honestly, it makes me think about how fundamentally flawed our approach to learning is today.
How so?
We just want to chug the water without ever checking to see if our glass is clean. We just want the data dump.
Exactly. We prioritize the acquisition of information over the transformation of the vessel holding it. But the manuscript doesn't just leave this concept of companionship, this cleaning of the glass in the realm of personal psychology or earthly self-improvement.
Oh, it goes way bigger.
It takes it to a level that is almost cosmic in its scope. It pushes the impact of Suba beyond this physical world and straight into the metaphysical realm and the afterlife.
This is where the text gets incredibly cinematic. It introduces what I can only describe as the intergalactic power of connection.
Right.
And the entire premise of this cosmic architecture rests on a single, incredibly powerful statement from the prophet. A man is with whom he loves.
Yes. The author moves from the earthly benefits of companionship to its eternal reality. The love and affinity you cultivate here dictate your placement in the hereafter.
Let's break down the imagery the text uses, because it is stunning. Even if you look at this purely metaphorically, the psychological truth is identical. The manuscript describes angels roaming the streets of the earth.
Like a search party.
Yeah. They aren't looking for kings or billionaires or even the grand scholars debating theology. They're specifically searching for gatherings of people who are sitting together remembering God, what is known as zikr.
Mm-hmm.
And when these roaming angels find one of these groups, they call out to each other, "Come to what you are looking for."
Mm.
And then they physically stack their wings, one on top of the other, creating a massive column of light that reaches all the way from that small gathering of people up to the lowest heaven.
It paints a picture of the earth and the heavens being structurally connected by these specific nodes of human beings gathered in spiritual remembrance. It's a network.
A network of light.
And the dialogue that follows between God and the angels in this tradition is central to the author's thesis about the power of the environment. God, knowing full well, asks the angels what his servants are doing, what they want, and what they fear.
Right.
The angels report that they are praising God, asking for paradise, and seeking refuge from the fire, despite having never seen either. And God declares, "I bear witness to you that I have forgiven them."
But here is my absolute favorite detail in the entire text. It's the story of the accidental attendee.
Oh, this is the best part.
One of the angels speaks up, almost like a lawyer pointing out a technicality, and says, "Wait, Lord, there is one guy in that gathering who isn't actually a seeker. He isn't there for the zikr.
He's just passing through.
Yeah, he just came to run an errand. He was just dropping off some keys or looking for his friend. He just happened to sit down for a minute."
Yeah.
And what is God's reply? They are such companions that anyone who sits with them will not be deprived.
That is the ultimate divine validation of the perfume seller analogy.
Totally.
That man didn't have the intention. He didn't have the knowledge. He didn't put in the hours of worship. But he stepped into the radius of the perfume, and the fragrance attached to him anyway.
It's amazing.
The sheer spiritual gravity of the righteous company pulled him into the zone of forgiveness. The text uses this to argue that the grace given to the spiritual guides and the sincere seekers is so abundant that it overflows onto anyone who simply associates with them.
It's a cosmic safety net. Think about the psychological equivalent of that. how our relational networks, our chosen families and friends, literally save us from our own worst tendencies.
We lean on them.
If you are deeply connected to good people, their momentum carries you through your own periods of weakness. And the text outlines how this safety net extends all the way into the day of judgment.
Right.
It describes a scenario where believers who have been saved will actually argue with God on behalf of their friends who didn't make it, who were sent to the fire. They will say, "Our Lord, our brothers, they prayed with us, they fasted with us, they performed pilgrimage with us," and God will tell them to go to the fire and physically pull out anyone they recognize.
This introduces the concept of intercession. The manuscript emphasizes that this isn't a violation of divine justice, but rather a manifestation of divine mercy operating through the channels of human love.
The bonds we form.
The bonds you form in this world with righteous people, with true guides, are not severed by death. They become unbreakable tethers in the afterlife. The text even notes a tradition where someone who merely handed a cup of water to a believer or helped them with a mundane task can ask for their intercession.
I really want you to think about what that means. The network of connections you build here, the people you choose to love and serve, literally dictates your reality there. And the text weaves this whole cosmic architecture together into a single cohesive equation.
Bringing it all together.
The ultimate final goal of human existence, according to the manuscript, is the love and pleasure of God. But the text argues that the mechanism for achieving that love is the love of the prophet. And how do you access the love of a prophet you cannot physically see?
You access it through the living.
You access it through the love and company of the righteous living guides, the murshids. They are the mirrors reflecting that original light. You sit with them, you absorb their state, they clean the glass of your heart, you begin to truly follow the path rather than just reading the map, and that leads you to the divine. It's an unbroken chain of transmission, heart to heart to heart.
It is a profound synthesis of theology, history, and human psychology. Let's pull all these threads together.
Yeah, let's recap.
This manuscript, Mershed, begins by diagnosing a universal illness. We are prone to spiritual deadness. We have access to infinite information. We have the maps, the rules, and the theology, yet our hearts remain unmoved.
Right, the cattle state.
We act mechanically. We risk living the cattle state driven only by appetite. The author then provides the cure, argued through scripture, history, and psychology, the transformative company of a true guide, a murshid.
Exactly. The Cure isn't a new app or a better reading list or, listening to another deep dive. The Cure is a person.
In an era where we genuinely believe we can learn everything from a Google search or master any skill from a YouTube tutorial, this ancient text serves as a vital course correction.
It really does.
It reminds us that while data can be transmitted server to server, true wisdom, actual character, and genuine spiritual life are transmitted heart to heart. You cannot download sincerity. You have to catch it from someone who is already infected with it.
We started this conversation talking about a game of chess. Knowing all the rules, memorizing the board, but never actually playing. Never feeling the weight of the moment. We talked about reading the physics of a bicycle, but never feeling the balance. This manuscript is essentially telling us to get out of our heads, step away from the rule books, and sit across the table from a master. Go find someone to hold the bike seat.
Absolutely.
The text says, quite literally, you become who you love and who you sit with. Your state is dictated by your company. So as we wrap up, I want you to take a hard, honest look at your life today.
The big question.
Who are the blacksmiths you are letting burn you? Whose soot and cynicism are you absorbing without even realizing it? And far more importantly, who are the perfume sellers you need to actively seek out so you can finally smell the fragrance of a life truly and deeply lived?
That is the question that changes everything.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time. Imagine, if you will, trying to learn a highly complex, like an intensely demanding and emotionally resonant skill purely by reading a PDF.
Oh, good luck with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you want to master the violin. You are determined. So you go online and you download this, 300-page technical manual detailing the exact physics of the strings.
Yeah, the acoustic resonance, all of that.
Exactly. You read about the cellular structure of the spruce wood used for the body. You study these incredibly dense geometric diagrams showing, like, the precise 45-degree angle the horsehair bow should strike the strings. And you memorize the exact poundage of tension required in your wrist. You read this thing cover to cover twice. You know the theory flawlessly. I mean, you could pass a written exam on violin playing with a perfect score.
You're an academic master of the violin at this point.
Totally. But then somebody hands you an actual physical wooden violin and a row. What happens when you draw that bow across the strings for the very first time?
Well, it is going to sound like a dying cat. Or, I mean, maybe like a rusted door hinge being slowly forced open. It's going to be awful.
Exactly. It's a complete disaster. Because no matter how comprehensive that text is, and no matter how flawless those diagrams are, you simply cannot learn the fine motor skills or the intuitive emotional resonance, the sheer visceral feeling of the music without a master.
You can't just read it.
Right. You need a mentor standing right there in the room with you. You need someone physically adjusting your elbow when it drops too low, someone demonstrating the vibrato so you can literally hear it vibrate in your own chest.
Yeah, someone to actually show you how the dead ink on the page lives and breathes in the real world.
And that massive canyon, that virtually uncrossable gap between intellectual understanding and, well, an internalized, lived reality is exactly the terrain we are exploring today.
It is a massive canyon for sure.
So we are thrilled to have you with us, the ever-curious learner, as we unpack a truly remarkable piece of source material. Today, we're diving into an Urdu manuscript.
Right.
And the text is this profound theological and honestly psychological exploration of the Murshid Kamil in the Islamic Sufi tradition. Now, for context, that term roughly translates to the perfect spiritual guide or the ultimate mentor.
Yeah, and it is an incredibly rich, densely layered text. I mean, it's packed. And to give this the rigorous attention it really deserves, we are setting a strict constraint for our exploration today.
We have to, yeah.
We are focusing exclusively on the first third of this source material. We just want to completely isolate and examine the foundational premise the author lays out in those opening sections.
Which is fascinating all on its own.
It really is. We're looking at the actual anatomy of spiritual mentorship. We're tracing its psychological, emotional, and historical roots right back to what the text presents as the ultimate mentor in the Islamic faith, which is the Prophet Muhammad.
What's absolutely fascinating to me is that long before modern neurobiology started talking about concepts like mirror neurons, right, or before cognitive psychology was measuring the impact of direct mentorship, or sociologists were studying how proximity dictates human behavior, this text lays out a highly sophisticated framework for it.
A rigorously documented one, too.
Yeah. It outlines how human beings actually internalize deep, permanent behavioral change. It makes this staggering claim right out of the gate. It argues that you simply cannot read your way to spiritual excellence.
You can't just study your way there.
Exactly. The text kicks off by making this razor-sharp distinction between what we do on the outside, like the observable actions, and what actually lives on the inside.
Right, and the author grounds this entire philosophy in a very specific historical report, a hadith, from a companion of the Prophet named Anas.
Okay, set this up for us.
So, in this report, the Prophet Muhammad makes a definitive statement. He says, Islam is outward, and Iman, which translates to faith, is in the heart. And the text explicitly notes this. He physically pointed to his own chest and repeated 3 times, Taqwa is here, Taqwa is here, Taqwa is here.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I feel like this tripartite division, this split between Islam, Iman, and Taqwa, is the engine driving the entire manuscript.
It is. It's the foundation for everything else.
So let's start with Islam in this specific context. If he says it's outward, we're talking about the physical geography of the religion, right? Like the actual mechanic.
Precisely. Yeah, in this particular usage, the word Islam refers to the outward observable practices. It is the physical motions.
So praying, fasting.
Praying, fasting, giving charity, making the pilgrimage.
Right.
These are actions that society can actually see and measure. They are entirely public. You can look at a person and say, yes, they are physically performing the ritual of fasting today.
I see. It makes me think of like learning a new language.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right, because the outward part is memorizing the vocabulary flashcards. You can perfectly recite the conjugations. Anyone listening to you can verify that you are making the correct phonetic sounds.
Sure.
But just reciting flashcards doesn't mean you actually understand the poetry of the language or that you can, dream in it.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the second term, Iman or faith.
Yeah, and the text is very explicit that the biological and spiritual housing for Iman is the heart.
The heart specifically.
Yes. That language analogy is highly appropriate here. If the outward practice is the vocabulary, Iman is the fluency that allows you to feel the poetry.
Fluency, I love that.
The text states unequivocally that you can go through all the outward motions. I mean, you can perform every physical act of the religion flawlessly without the internal fluency actually existing.
Wow. So you can be perfectly practicing, but internally empty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The heart is the soil where this fluency grows. True faith is not a cognitive checklist. It is an internal state of being.
Okay, and then we get to the third term, which seems to be the most critical piece of this entire puzzle. Taqwa. And he points directly to his chest, not his head, not his brain, his chest.
Yes, and taqwa is a notoriously difficult word to translate into English.
I've seen it translated a bunch of different ways.
Right. It is often rendered as God consciousness or piety or a deep protective reverence, but linguistically, the root word means to shield or protect oneself.
To shield oneself.
In the context of this manuscript, taqwa is the ultimate internal mechanism. It is this heightened, vibrating awareness of the divine that shapes a person's every instinct into true servitude.
So it's not just a belief, it's an active, protective state.
Exactly. And the text makes a very bold foundational claim right here. It posits that the prophet's heart is the actual literal treasury of this faith and this reverence.
It's a treasury. Okay, so if I'm following the logic here, the outward actions are the vocabulary, the faith is the fluency, and this deep reverence, this taqwa, is the actual soul of the language.
That tracks perfectly, yes.
But wait, if the text is saying the master repository, like the ultimate treasury of this power, is the prophet's heart, that creates a massive bottleneck.
Oh, a huge one.
It immediately raises a question, right? If the heart of the guide is the treasury, how does anyone else get access to that treasure? I mean, you can't just plug a USB cable into someone's chest and download their spiritual state.
No, you definitely can't. And that is exactly the existential problem humanity faces, according to the author.
How so?
Well, the central thesis of the text is that you cannot access this internal state in isolation. You cannot lock yourself in a room with a stack of scriptures, engage in intense solitary reading, and just spontaneously generate taqwa out of thin air.
Because the PDF isn't enough to learn the violin.
Right. The intellect alone is entirely insufficient. The author explains that the early Muslims, the Sahaba or the companions, achieved this profound internal state strictly through their physical and emotional proximity to the Prophet.
Wow. It really sets up the absolute necessity of a human conduit. It's arguing that divine concepts require a human transmitter.
They absolutely do, according to this framework.
It's saying it's not enough to just possess the written words of the revelation, right?
Yeah.
You need the living, breathing embodiment of those words to transfer the feeling, the internal reality from their heart directly into yours.
That is the core argument, and the text moves from this theoretical framework of the heart right into a deeply compelling historical narrative to prove how this transfer of state supersedes almost everything else in the religion.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the narrative?
The author quotes a specific verse from the Quran that commands the believers respond to Allah and His messenger when He calls you to that which gives you life.
Wait, that which gives you life?
Yeah.
But if you are a companion of the Prophet in 7th century Arabia, you are already walking around. You know, you're talking, eating, breathing.
Yeah.
You are biologically alive.
Very much alive, yes.
So what life is he possible calling them to?
This is where the text introduces the concept of hayat-e-qalbi, which translates to the spiritual life of the heart.
The life of the heart.
The author synthesizes this beautifully. Biological life merely allows you to exist. It allows your lungs to pump air and your stomach to digest food.
It's just baseline survival.
Exactly. But hayat-e-qalbi, the spiritual life, is the transformative spark that allows your intellectual knowledge to mutate into absolute unshakable certainty.
Oh, wow.
It is the fundamental difference between knowing a fact and feeling a truth so deeply in your bones that it completely alters your reality.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does the text illustrate this?
To really drive this point home, the source material brings in the story of a companion named Abu Sa'id al-Mu'alla.
Right, the Abu Sa'id story.
Yeah, and this story perfectly encapsulates the tension between solitary ritual and living mentorship.
Set the scene for us. What happens?
So Abu Sa'id al-Mu'alla is inside the mosque. He is in the middle of performing his formal prayers.
Like the obligatory ritual prayer.
Yes. He is fully engaged in the outward, highly structured, solitary ritual of his religion. He is reciting the words, performing the physical bowing and prostrating.
He's deep in the zone.
Completely focused. And while he is deep in this prayer, the prophet physically walks into the area and calls out to him.
Oh, man. Now, if I'm Abu Sa'id, I am in a serious bind
A huge bind. Yeah.
because I am literally in the middle of a direct, solitary communication with God. That is the highest form of worship.
That's the assumption, certainly.
So Abu Sa'id does what I think almost any devout person would do in that situation. He ignores the call.
He does.
He decides to finish his prayer first. He prioritizes the solitary ritual over the human interaction.
And from a purely technical, rule-based perspective, you might argue he did exactly the right thing. I mean, you aren't supposed to interrupt your formal prayer for casual conversation.
Right, that feels like a big rule break.
But when Abu Sa'id finally finishes his ritual and approaches the Prophet corrects him.
He corrects him. He doesn't say, hey, good job finishing your prayer.
No, not at all. Instead, he quotes that exact Quranic verse. He reminds Abu Sa'id that he must respond when called to that which gives you life.
Wow. This is a radical paradigm shift. Think about what this actually means.
It is massive.
The text is arguing that responding to the living guide actually supersedes the solitary ritual of prayer.
It is a profound reprioritization of what actually constitutes spiritual growth.
It really is.
The author uses this specific anecdote to show that the life of the heart, that hayat-i-qalbi, is not generated by locking yourself away and performing repetitive motions.
Even if those motions are divinely ordained prayers.
Exactly. The true life is transmitted through the interaction with the perfect guide. The Prophet was calling him to the very state of being that the prayer is merely attempting to achieve.
Okay, it's like, imagine you are standing at the base of a massive mountain.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You're staring intently at a topographical map, trying to figure out the route to the summit.
Right.
And while you were staring at this piece of paper, the world's greatest mountaineer taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, put the map down, give me your hand, let's go climb this thing.
Yeah, let's just go do it.
But you wave the guide away because you are too busy looking at the map.
That's brilliant.
The text is saying the guide is the way up the mountain. The map is just pointing to him.
That is a phenomenal analogy for the author's argument. The map is essential, obviously, but it cannot literally pull you up the rock face.
Right. You need the hand to pull you up.
The text is systematically deconstructing this deeply held human assumption that solitary, purely intellectual, or purely ritualistic practice is sufficient for ultimate transformation.
It's kind of shaking the foundations of how we normally think about religion.
It really is. And to absolutely cement this idea, the manuscript moves to perhaps the most famous pedagogical moment in Islamic history.
Oh, this is the big one.
Yes, an event universally referred to as the Hadith of Jibril, or the tradition of Gabriel.
This scene is so incredibly cinematic. Like, it reads like a movie script.
It does.
So according to the text, the prophet is sitting in a gathering with his companions. It's just a normal day.
Yeah.
And suddenly, a man appears out of nowhere.
Just materializes.
Yeah. And the text is highly specific about the visual details of this stranger. It says he is wearing exceedingly white clothes, and he has pitch black hair.
Right. Highly contrasting features.
And there is not a single speck of dust on his garments. He shows zero signs of travel. No sweat, no sand from the desert.
Which is impossible in that environment.
Exactly. Yet not a single person in this tight-knit community recognizes him. He is a complete, pristine stranger who just dropped right into their midst.
And those visual details are not just historical trivia. They are crucial because they establish this intense atmosphere of the surreal.
You would immediately know something supernatural is happening.
Right. The companions realize immediately that this is not a normal event. The stranger walks right through the crowd, approaches the prophet, and does something highly intimate yet intensely respectful.
What does he do?
He sits down on the ground, bringing his knees perfectly flush against the prophet's knees, and he places his hands resting on his own thighs. It is the classic, idealized posture of a deeply attentive student presenting himself to a master teacher.
It's a deeply physical, very embodied posture, knee to knee.
Extremely physical.
And then the stranger essentially starts conducting a public pop quiz.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. He looks at the prophet and says, "Tell me about Islam." And the prophet answers by listing the outward actions, the prayer, the fasting, the charity.
The flashcards, going back to your language analogy.
Exactly. And the stranger replies, "You have spoken the truth."
Which is wild.
Right. Now imagine being a companion sitting there. You are completely baffled.
Right.
Who is this unknown guy asking basic questions and then verifying the prophet's answers as if he's the one grading the test?
The tension in the room would have been absolutely palpable. Everyone must have been holding their breath.
So what happens next?
The stranger then asks about iman, or faith, And the prophet defines it internally. He says it's belief in God, the angels, the books, the prophets, the day of judgment, and divine destiny.
The internal fluency.
Exactly. And again, the stranger nods and says, "You have spoken the truth."
Okay.
But then comes the absolute climax of the interaction. The stranger asks a third question. "Tell me about Isan."
Isan. This is the peak of the mountain we were just talking about.
Yes. Isan is the absolute pinnacle. The prophet defines Isan as worshiping Allah as if you see him, and if you cannot see him, knowing he sees you.
Oh, wow. Worshipping as if you see him.
It is the ultimate state of spiritual excellence. It is the absolute, unbroken, vibrating awareness of the divine presence in every single waking moment.
Okay, so the stranger asks these 3 questions, verifies the answers, and then what?
The stranger eventually gets up and just leaves.
Just walks out.
Yeah. And after he is gone, the prophet turns to his bewildered companions and drops the massive reveal.
He tells them who it was?
He tells them, "Do you know who that was? That was Jibril, the archangel Gabriel, who came to teach you your religion."
Okay, I have to stop here.
Yeah.
I have to genuinely ask because this seems completely paradoxical.
Oh.
The text explicitly says the angel came to teach them.
Right.
But the angel didn't give a lecture.
He didn't.
He didn't bring a new scroll. He didn't even provide the answers. He took the physical form of a student, asked questions, and let the prophet give the answers.
He just facilitated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why manifest physically at all? If you are an archangel of pure light, why not just telepathically inspire the knowledge into their minds? Or, I don't know, at least stand at the front of the room and deliver a booming sermon.
That is the exact friction the author wants the reader to feel. That's the whole point.
Really?
Yes. Why the elaborate physical theater? Why the knee-to-knee contact? If we examine the underlying mechanics of this narrative, the text is using this event to prove that Deen, the religion, the entire spiritual way of life, is fundamentally, inextricably bound to the physical teacher-student dynamic.
The medium is the message.
Precisely.
The way he taught was by showing them how to learn.
Yes. The angel didn't bring new information. The angel modeled how information must be received to spark actual transformation. Think about the modern science of mirror neurons. How our brains actually wire themselves by observing the physical actions and emotional states of others.
Right. We mirror what we see.
Exactly. Even a being of pure light, an archangel, took the dense physical form of a human student sitting respectfully knee to knee with a human master to demonstrate a cosmic rule.
Which is
Attaining Isan requires a physical guide.
that is mind-blowing. You cannot reach that ultimate state, that intense, vibrating reality of feeling constantly watched by the divine, just by reading the dictionary definition of Isan.
You absolutely cannot.
You need the knee-to-knee transmission. You need the posture of surrender. You need the mentorship. The angel didn't come to teach them new facts. He came to teach them how to be students of a living master.
The author asserts that this relational dynamic is not just a historical quirk of the early community, it is a permanent structural requirement of the faith.
A permanent requirement.
The state of Isan, that spiritual excellence, is a direct result of the heart-to-heart transmission that occurs only in that close proximity. What?
Establishing this as a permanent rule creates a massive existential logistical problem for the faith. And the author addresses this.
Right. He immediately addresses it, yes.
Right. The continuity problem. And it's a terrifying problem if you really think about it.
It really is.
The text explicitly acknowledges that Prophet Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, Khatami Nubuwat. There will be no more prophets after him.
None. He is the last.
So if this vital heart-to-heart transmission requires a physical, living mentor, what happens when that mentor dies?
That's the million-dollar question.
The ultimate treasury of faith is gone from the earth. Does the light just go out? Does the second generation just have to settle for reading the maps because the mountain guide is dead?
It is the ultimate crisis of succession. How does a spiritual tradition survive the mortality of its founder?
How does the author tackle this?
The author tackles this head-on. The text cites another hadith explaining the historical pattern of divine guidance. It notes that while the children of Israel were led by a sequential chain of prophets when one prophet died, another prophet was immediately raised to take his place, the Muslim community will not have new prophets.
Right, because of the seal.
Exactly. Instead, they will be led by caliphs, a word that translates to successors or deputies.
But the text is very careful to reframe what successor actually means in this specific context, isn't it?
Yes, very careful.
Because it's not talking about political succession, is it? It's not about who gets to be the mayor or the governor or the head of state and run the treasury.
Not at all. The author's viewpoint, which is deeply rooted in Sufi theology, is that this vital succession is primarily about the transfer of spiritual light and internal authority.
The spiritual light.
Yes, the concept of the living guide does not die with the prophet. Instead, that hayat qalbi, that profound life of the heart we discussed earlier, transfers from the prophet's chest directly into the chests of his most transformed companions.
Wow. The text actually highlights Abu Bakr, the first caliph, making a specific point that whatever was poured into the prophet's chest was subsequently poured into Abu Bakr's chest.
It's a beautiful metaphor of vessels being filled.
Yeah, it really is.
And from those elite companions, that light transfers to their most dedicated students, the generation known as the Tabi'in, and from them to the next generation, creating an unbroken living chain of transmission down through the centuries.
An unbroken chain.
The author argues that these aliyah, or spiritual masters, act as the living, breathing representatives of that original prophetic light in every single era.
Think about this in a secular context for a moment to really grasp the mechanics here.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think about any great intellectual, artistic, or even martial arts lineage.
Oh, like masters and apprentices?
Exactly. You have Socrates, who famously never wrote a single word down, pouring his entire philosophy into Plato through relentless face-to-face conversation. And then Plato pours that worldview into Aristotle. Aristotle tutors Alexander the Great. It is an unbroken chain of human-to-human transmission.
It's how the greatest knowledge survives.
What this Urdu manuscript is arguing for is a spiritual, almost neurobiological version of that. You, as a seeker of spiritual excellence, must become a link in an unbroken chain.
You have to plug in.
You cannot just pick up a book written 1,000 years ago, read it in your bedroom, and bypass the chain.
Because the book only contains the data. The chain contains the state of being.
The state of being. That is the crucial difference.
And the text provides a brilliant, deeply empathetic psychological case study to prove just how fragile that state of being is when a human being is separated from their guide.
Oh, this is one of my favorite parts.
It is, without a doubt, one of the most compelling and universally relatable narratives in the first third of the manuscript.
We are talking about the Hanzala syndrome.
Yes, the Hanzala syndrome.
I love this section because it cuts through all the overly pious, sanitized versions of religious history and just shows raw human struggle.
It's extremely validating.
Let's set the scene carefully here. Hanzala is not a casual follower.
No, not at all.
He is one of the official scribes of the prophet. He's an inner circle companion, deeply embedded in the daily life of the revelation.
He's as elite as it gets.
Right. But one day, another senior companion, Abu Bakr, is walking down the street and sees Hanzala literally running through the alleys, crying out in absolute despair.
He's practically having a breakdown.
He's yelling, Hanzala has become a hypocrite. Hanzala has become a hypocrite.
It is a shocking, scandalous confession for someone of his stature to make publicly.
Imagine seeing someone like that just losing it in the street.
Abu Bakr stops him, likely horrified, and asks him what on earth he is talking about. And Hanzala describes a psychological and spiritual whiplash that I think anyone who has ever attended a profoundly inspiring seminar or gone on a deep meditation retreat or had a sudden moment of crystal clarity about their life goals can intimately understand.
Oh, 100%. What exactly does Hanzala say?
Hanzala says to Abu Bakr, when we are sitting with the messenger of Allah, he reminds us of heaven and hell, and it's so vivid. It's like we can see them with our own physical eyes.
So he is describing being in that peak state of Ihsan, the ultimate spiritual high. He feels completely aligned, completely aware.
Exactly. But then Hanzala explains the inevitable crash.
The crash.
He says, but when we leave his presence and we go home and we mingle with our wives and our children and we attend to our farms and our businesses, we forget much of it. Hanzala is experiencing a severe baseline regression. He feels that because he cannot maintain the intense, vibrating spiritual clarity he experiences in the presence of the guide when he is alone doing mundane, everyday tasks, his faith must be a complete fraud.
He thinks he's faking it.
Yes. He believes he is a hypocrite because his internal state fluctuates based on his geography.
I think we all know this exact feeling.
Oh, for sure.
You go to like a 3-day leadership seminar or a wellness retreat. You are surrounded by mentors and like-minded people.
Yeah.
You feel invincible.
You're ready to conquer the world.
Right. You write down this ambitious 10-point plan to change your entire life. You are buzzing with energy, and then you go home.
And reality hits.
It's Tuesday morning. The dog threw up on the rug. The kids are screaming. Your inbox is overflowing. And suddenly, you snap at your spouse in traffic.
Yep. The baseline returns.
And you think, wow, everything I felt at that retreat was a lie. I haven't changed at all. I'm a hypocrite. That is the Hanzala syndrome.
It is the stark realization of our own psychological gravity. And what makes this story so powerful in the text is Abu Bakr's reaction.
Which is amazing.
Right. Abu Bakr, who is arguably the most steadfast, closest companion of the Prophet, doesn't judge Hanzala. He doesn't say, wow, you need to get it together.
He actually agrees with him.
He actually confesses, by God, I feel the exact same way.
It is wild.
So these two elite figures in the community both go to the Prophet in a state of sheer panic, essentially turning themselves in for spiritual fraud.
And the Prophet's response to them is just an absolute masterclass in psychological realism and validation.
It really is.
He doesn't scold them. He doesn't tell them they need to pray harder or read more scripture to fix the problem.
He doesn't dismiss their feelings at all.
Instead, he swears an oath and says, by him in whose hand is my soul, if you remain constantly in the state you were in when you are with me, and in constant remembrance, the angels would literally shake your hands on your beds and in your streets.
He is validating that the peak state they experience in his presence is real, and it is incredibly elevated.
But then he adds the crucial grounding caveat. He says, but Hanzala, there's a time for this and a time for that. And he repeats it 3 times for emphasis. A time for this and a time for that.
This completely reframes everything for them.
It really does.
Yeah.
But why does the author highlight this story in the manuscript? What is the underlying mechanism at play here?
Well, the author uses this anecdote to break down the mechanics of what we might call the proximity effect.
The proximity effect.
Okay. The text highlights this story to explain the fundamental why behind the necessity of the murshid, the guide. The spiritual high, that vivid vision of heaven and hell that Hanzala experiences, isn't being generated by Hanzala's own internal battery.
Wait, really?
No, he is not producing the state himself.
Oh, it's an ambient radiation.
Yes, that is the perfect way to visualize it. It is a spiritual ambient radiation coming directly from the presence of the ultimate mentor.
That makes so much sense.
When Hanzala is in the room with the Prophet, he is being illuminated by the Prophet's light. His own state is elevated simply by being in the blast radius of the guide's taqwa.
The blast radius of his reverence.
Exactly. But when he leaves the room, he steps out of the radiation zone. His own human baseline takes over. Gravity pulls him back down to earth, to the realities of the farms, the family, and the mundane world.
So if we connect this back to the core thesis of the manuscript,
Let's do it.
the text is using Hanzala to demonstrate that consistency in spiritual excellence is practically impossible in total isolation.
It's impossible.
Left to its own devices, the human baseline always wins. You cannot sustain the peak state alone. You need to repeatedly return to the source of the radiation to recharge.
That's the entire point of the spiritual lineage.
The text is basically saying, look, if the absolute best of the best, the scribes who literally wrote down the revelation, couldn't maintain the state of Isan without the physical, atmospheric presence of the guide, what makes you think you can achieve it alone sitting in your room hundreds of years later?
Exactly. It's a reality check. The Hanzala story completely validates the necessity of the living mentor. The mentor provides the physical and spiritual environment where the heart can actually experience the truth, rather than just knowing it conceptually.
It's the difference between reading about warmth and actually sitting next to a fire.
Beautifully said. And this brings us to the final and perhaps most dramatic section of the material we are covering today.
Okay, where does it go next?
This section deals with radical psychological transformation. The author provides 2 final historical case studies that prove how this mentorship alters the heart directly.
Okay.
And crucially, how it often entirely bypasses the intellect.
This is where we see the profound difference between arguing someone into a belief through logic versus transforming their heart through presence.
Yes, the contrast is stark.
The first case study involves a man named Thumama bin Uthal. Let's look at the psychology of this encounter because it's intense.
Very intense. So Thuma was a powerful, wealthy chieftain from a neighboring region, and he was violently, militantly opposed to the new religion of Islam.
He was an active enemy.
Oh, absolutely. He had plotted against the Muslims.
Yeah.
But he is eventually captured by Muslim forces and brought to the Prophet's mosque in the city of Medina.
Okay.
As a prisoner of war, he is physically tied to a wooden pillar inside the mosque.
Right in the center of everything. So he is a captive. And he is incredibly defiant. I mean, he is not cowed at all.
Not even a little bit.
When the Prophet approaches him, Thuma essentially looks him dead in the eye and says, "If you kill me, you kill a man whose blood will be violently avenged by my tribe. If you want ransom, ask for whatever wealth you want, and it will be given."
He's daring them.
Yeah. But the underlying sentiment is one of pure, unadulterated hatred. He explicitly tells the Prophet that there is no face on the entire earth he hates more than the Prophet's face.
That's bold for a prisoner.
Right. He says there is no religion he hates more than his religion, and no city he hates more than his city.
That is an extraordinarily high baseline of animosity. The hostility is absolute.
So what happens?
Now, consider the typical response to such defiance. You might expect a trial, an interrogation, or perhaps a fierce theological debate to break him down.
Or just execution, honestly, in those times.
True. But the Prophet does none of those things. Thuma is tied to this pillar in the center of the community for 3 full days.
3 days.
And the Prophet never engages him in a debate about the existence of God. He never brings out scrolls to logically prove the religion is true.
He doesn't try to win an argument.
No. He just walks by him each day and asks a very simple question. What do you have, Thuma?
Just checking in.
And each day, Thuma repeats his defiant, hostile stance.
We really need to pause and look at the mechanism here. Why tie him to a pillar in the mosque for 3 days? Why not a prison cell?
Ah, that's the strategic genius of it.
Right, because by placing him in the mosque, Thuma is forced to passively observe the social ecosystem of the Muslims. He is watching how they pray. He is watching how they interact with each other.
He's observing the culture in real time.
Exactly. He is watching the character of the Prophet in real time. He is sitting directly in that ambient radiation we just talked about. He is marinating in it for 72 hours.
Marinating is the perfect word. That passive observation is key. Thuma's intellect is fully prepared for a fight. His shields are entirely up against logical argument or threats of violence.
He's ready to spar verbally or physically.
Exactly. But he has no defense against silent, observable character. And then on the 3rd day, the Prophet does something completely unexpected, something that breaks Thuma's psychological framework entirely.
What does he do?
He simply tells his companions, untie Thuma.
Wait, what?
He lets him go. Unconditionally. No ransom paid, no forced conversion, no promise of peace required, just radical, unearned grace.
And the psychological flip is instantaneous.
It happens right then and there.
Thuma is untied, he leaves the mosque, walks to a nearby grove of palm trees, washes himself, and then voluntarily walks right back into the mosque.
Freely, of his own accord.
Yes, and he publicly declares his faith. But listen to the specific words he uses, because they are a perfect, mirrored reflection of his earlier hatred.
Let's hear the quote.
He stands there and says, "By God, there was no face on earth more hateful to me than your face. But now your face has become the most beloved of all faces to me."
A total 180.
Right. There was no religion more hateful to me than your religion, but now it is the most beloved. There was no city more hateful than your city, but now it is the most beloved.
The author uses this dramatic reversal to highlight a fundamental truth about human nature. Profound, paradigm-shifting change almost never happens in the intellect first. It happens in the heart.
The intellect follows the heart.
Exactly. Thuma was not convinced by a clever syllogism. He was not defeated by a logical proof. His internal reality was fundamentally altered by direct observation of the master's character and the overwhelming reception of grace.
This is incredible.
The physical presence of the perfect guide and the unexpected act of mercy literally melted the hatred in his chest and replaced it with love. The text argues that true iman, true faith, is transmitted through this kind of profound emotional and spiritual intervention, not through winning debates.
It's intensely visceral. You know, you can't debate someone into falling in love.
No, you can't.
And you can't debate someone into faith.
Right.
And that visceral physical nature of transformation is even more obvious, even shocking, honestly, in the final case study we're looking at today.
Right.
And that is the story of Ubay bin Ka'b.
Yes. Ubay's story provides a fascinating contrast to the Imam.
How so?
Well, Thumama was an enemy, right? An outsider. Ube was an insider. He was a highly respected companion, known specifically as a master of reciting the Quran.
So he's basically a scholar in the community.
Exactly. But the text relates a deeply vulnerable moment where Ube experiences a terrifying intellectual and spiritual crisis.
What happens?
He is in the mosque and he hears other companions reciting the Quran in regional dialects or phonetic variations that he is completely unfamiliar with.
Oh, that would be jarring for a master reciter.
Right. And when the prophet validates these different recitations as correct, Ube's worldview just fractures.
Ube later confesses that this event threw him into a state of severe, suffocating doubt.
A real crisis of faith.
Yeah. He describes it as a doubt worse than his days of ignorance before he even found faith. He is suddenly questioning the very foundation of the revelation.
This whole reality is shaking.
He's thinking, wait, if they are reading it differently and I am reading it differently, what is the truth? His intellect is spiraling totally out of control. It's a full-blown spiritual panic attack.
Now, think about how we handle intellectual doubt in the modern world.
Oh, we love to over-explain it.
Exactly. If your top student comes to you with a severe, paralyzing theological question, the standard protocol is to sit them down, open the reference books, explain the historical linguistics, and rationalize the problem until the intellect is satisfied.
You treat the doubt as a math equation to be solved.
Yes. But the prophet doesn't do that. He doesn't give Ube a linguistic lecture on Arabic dialects.
No, he throws a massive curveball.
The text says the prophet saw the state Ube was in. He saw the dark, suffocating cloud of doubt hanging over him, and he physically reached out and struck Ube on the chest.
He hit him.
He actually struck him on the chest. It is a shocking moment.
So surprising.
And what is the result of that sudden physical strike to the chest?
Well, Ube describes the aftermath. He says he broke into a heavy, drenching sweat, and suddenly he was filled with such a terrifying, awe-inspiring awareness of God that it felt as if he were looking directly at the Almighty.
The intellectual doubt simply vanished.
It just evaporated. But we really have to look at how this happened. Why a strike to the chest?
Right. Why not just explain it?
Think about the neurobiology of a panic attack or a severe anxiety spiral. When your prefrontal cortex is caught in an infinite loop of doubt, talking doesn't help.
No, you can't reason with a panic attack.
You can't outthink an overthinking brain. But a sudden physical shock, like a splash of freezing cold water, or in this case, a strike to the chest, bypasses the intellect entirely.
It interrupts the loop.
It hits the somatic nervous system. It forces the brain to reset. The guide bypassed the spiraling intellect and directly intervened in the physical housing of the heart.
That is a brilliant synthesis of the event. The intellectual doubt was merely a symptom. The actual disease was a sudden absence of spiritual certainty.
And you don't treat a symptom if you can cure the disease.
Exactly. The guide didn't argue with the symptom. He cured the disease through direct physical, spiritual intervention. It is the culmination of the author's argument in this first third of the manuscript.
I just marvel at the intensely physical, embodied nature of all these interactions we've covered today.
It's so different from how we learn now.
I mean, the angel sitting so close, his knees touch the prophet, the unbinding of ropes from Thuma's wrists, the physical strike to Ube's chest. None of this is abstract.
None of it.
None of this is just reading text on a page. It is all deeply, physically relational.
Which brings us to the profound question this text poses to our modern sensibilities.
Okay, let's hear it.
How much of our current approach to learning, to faith, to self-improvement, to mastering any deep skill is purely sterilely cognitive?
Oh, almost all of it.
We consume infinite data. We read endless texts. We download podcasts. But we are entirely missing this vital, transformative heart-to-heart element.
We're reading the violin manual.
We are. The text insists, with relentless historical evidence, that true belief, iman, and true excellence, ihsan, are transmitted. They are passed from human chest to human chest through love, through observation, through proximity, and through the direct intervention of a master.
You just can't get that from a screen.
You simply cannot read the rules of the religion and expect your heart to come alive. Just as you cannot read a manual and expect to play the violin.
You need the internal operating system installed by someone who already has it running perfectly.
Exactly. The Murshid Kamil, the perfect guide, is not just a teacher of historical facts or a lecturer on jurisprudence. They are a spiritual physician.
A physician. I like that.
They are a living conduit of that original prophetic light whose very presence, whose ambient radiation, alters the internal landscape of the student.
And that brings us full circle to the end of our journey through this first constraint of the source text.
It's been quite a journey.
We started with that universally relatable problem, the impossibility of learning a profound skill purely from a PDF.
Right.
We saw how this Urdu manuscript anchors that intuitive truth in deep theology, parsing out the difference between the outward mechanics of Islam and the inward living reality of Iman and Taqwa, housed in the heart.
We explored how the ultimate mentor sparked that Hayat Qalbi, that spiritual life, proving through the story of Abu Sa'id that responding to the living guide supersedes even the most sacred solitary rituals.
We watched an archangel materialize to sit knee to knee, proving that even beings of light must model the physical posture of a student to attain spiritual excellence.
We confronted the existential terror of losing that physical presence and saw how the lineage of caliphs and awliya maintains the unbroken chain of transmission.
And finally, we saw through the incredibly raw human stories of Hanzala's despair, the Mazhab's radical flip from hatred to love, and Ubay's visceral deliverance from doubt, that maintaining this spiritual state requires the physical, empathetic, intervening presence of a guide.
The author has laid a meticulous, undeniable foundation here in this first third of the text. The chain must remain unbroken. The light must be passed chest to chest.
This has been a truly paradigm-shifting exploration. It completely upends our modern, hyper-individualistic assumptions about how profound knowledge and internal change are actually acquired.
It really does challenge the status quo.
And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought, a provocation that builds on the deep mechanics we've unpacked today.
Something to mull over.
Exactly. In our current hyper-connected digital age, we have access to more raw information, more digitized scriptures, more philosophical texts, and more self-help manuals than any generation of human beings in the history of the world.
It's overwhelming.
It is all right there, glowing on the screens in our pockets. We can read the greatest thoughts ever recorded while sitting entirely alone in our bedrooms.
True.
But based on what this text so powerfully argues about the absolute necessity of the Murshid, the living guide, if we are attempting to learn everything through screens, if we are endlessly scrolling in isolation, if we believe that solitary reading is the highest form of seeking truth,
Are we missing the point entirely?
are we gaining infinite intellectual data but actively, tragically starving our hearts of the spiritual life that only ever comes from connection with another human being?
A powerful question.
Are we brilliantly memorizing the manual while entirely forgetting how to play the instrument? Think deeply about who your guides are, not just what your books are. Until next time, keep diving deep. So usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of precision, right?
Right, yeah, it's almost like engineering.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, if you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, the doctor points to the screen, and the path forward is just obvious. It's binary. Broken or not broken.
Yeah, you just put a cast on it and you're good to go.
Right. But when you step into the absolute deepest layers of human spirituality, the psychology of the ego and, what they call the diseases of the heart, there is no x-ray machine.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
There is no MRI for arrogance, unfortunately.
Right. You cannot draw blood to test for hidden jealousy. The diagnostic landscape is just completely murky.
It really is. It is a profound dilemma, honestly. When you are trying to diagnose a disease of the spiritual heart, which is the center of human consciousness in this framework, the tools we normally rely on just completely fail us.
Which is why today we are doing a deep dive into an excerpted document titled Murshed.docs. And this text dives incredibly deep into the theology and philosophy behind Islamic spiritual mentorship.
Yeah, specifically, this operates within the framework of Sufism, or the Tariqa.
And before we go any further into that, I want to define those terms so we aren't just, throwing jargon around for you guys listening.
Yeah.
So when the text talks about Sufism and Tariqa, what are we actually looking at structurally?
Well, think of it this way. If general religious practice is the broad public highway that everyone drives on, the basic rules, the daily prayers, the ethical baseline, then the Tariqa is a highly specialized, rigorous curriculum.
Okay, so it's a step up.
A huge step up. The word Tariqa literally translates to path or way. It is the experiential science of Sufism, which is all about the inward purification of the self. So we're not talking about layperson theology here. We're talking about the spiritual equivalent of like an elite residency program for the soul.
I love that analogy. And for our mission today, we're actually focusing strictly on the second 32% of this source document.
Right, the middle section.
Yeah, because that middle section contains the absolute core argument of this text. It insists on one incredibly provocative idea, which is that to walk this path, a living spiritual guide known as a murshid is absolutely, unconditionally vital.
Unconditionally. The text essentially argues that you cannot just read the holy books, meditate in your room, and figure it out on your own. It's just not possible.
Right. And just to set the parameters for you listening, we are looking at a deeply specific religious text today. Our goal is not to proselytize or tell you, like, hey, this is the one true way to live your life.
Definitely not. We're here as impartial observers, really, just to understand the mechanics of this worldview.
Exactly. We want to know how this centuries-old tradition of mentorship operates psychologically and philosophically.
And philosophically, I mean, it is a masterclass in a completely different way of knowing. It directly challenges the modern, hyper-individualistic assumption that if you have the data, you have the mastery.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the foundational premise the text sets up is all about apprenticeship. It draws a parallel between mundane, worldly skills and the ultimate spiritual skill.
Right, the carpentry analogy.
Yeah, like if I want to become a master carpenter, I don't just go to the library and read a book about wood. I have to stand next to a master carpenter. I have to watch how they hold the chisel, see how they respond when the wood splinters, and have them physically correct my posture.
Which makes perfect sense for physical skills, but the text argues that the purification of the inner self works the exact same way. It requires a murshid kamil, a perfect or completed guide.
And what's the logic behind that?
Well, the logic is straightforward, but the implications are immense. The text argues that the taming of the human ego is the most complex, volatile, and difficult science in existence.
So it's harder than carpentry.
Oh, way harder. I mean, if you wouldn't trust a guy to rebuild your car's transmission just because he read a manual, why would you trust your own unguided mind to rebuild your soul? You need a specialist who has already successfully navigated that exact terrain.
I get the logic. It's like trying to become a neurosurgeon just by reading a textbook without ever doing a residency.
Yeah.
I don't want someone operating on my brain whose only credential is that they highlighted every page of Brain Surgery for Dummies.
Exactly. You'd run out of the hospital immediately.
But let me push back here, because in a religious context, believers consider their foundational texts, like the Quran, to be divine, perfect, the literal word of God.
Right.
So if a text is truly divine and perfect, shouldn't reading it be enough?
Right.
By introducing a human middleman, aren't you implying the divine text is somehow insufficient?
That is the exact counter-argument the text anticipates. And to dismantle it, the source brings in the perspective of Imam Fakhruddin Razi.
Okay, who was he?
He was one of the most towering intellects and theologians in the 12th century. And Razi shifts the entire paradigm. He argues that the problem isn't the transmitter. The divine text is perfect.
Okay, so what's the problem?
The problem is the receiver. The human intellect interacting with the text is inherently flawed.
Flawed how? Like, we just aren't smart enough to understand the vocabulary. Is it a reading comprehension issue?
No, it's much deeper than that. Razi is talking about the structural corruption of the ego. Our intellects, our cognitive processing, our emotional biases, they are all hopelessly entangled with our desires.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because of this, human beings possess an astounding capacity for self-deception. When your flawed, ego-driven intellect interacts with a perfect, divine text, the ego doesn't just submit. It weaponizes the text.
Now, that makes total sense. I mean, think about your own life for a second. Have you ever been in an argument with someone online or even just your spouse, and you find an article or a statistic that proves your point?
Oh, all the time.
Right. You don't read that article to grow or find the truth. You use it as a club to beat the other person over the head and feel superior. The text is saying we do the exact same thing with spirituality.
Precisely. You read a chapter about the importance of charity, and instead of becoming generous, your ego looks around the room and judges everyone who isn't giving as much as you.
That is so true. It's wild how the ego does that.
Razi points out that the intellect is often completely incapable of distinguishing absolute truth from the subtle trickery of the self. This is why Razi posits that the flawed intellect must attach itself to a perfected intellect, the murshid.
To borrow their light.
Right. Yes, you have to borrow their light to see your own darkness. The imperfect mind simply cannot see its own blind spots.
It's the psychological equivalent of trying to look at your own eyeball without a mirror. You literally cannot do it. The Murshid acts as that external mirror to show you where the dirt is. And the text suggests that having the book without the mirror is actually dangerous.
It leads to what we might call spiritual neurosis. And, I mean, look at the world today. We have more access to religious scriptures, philosophical treatises, and psychological data than any generation in human history.
Yeah, the entire library of human thought is sitting in our pockets.
Exactly. Yet, confusion and anxiety are the baseline. Information without a living, breathing model of implementation doesn't create wisdom. It creates a highly educated form of chaos.
Okay, so if the human intellect is essentially compromised hardware that cannot run the divine software without crashing, we need external hardware. We need these guides. But who are they? The text categorizes them very specifically, doesn't it?
It does. It doesn't just say, hey, go find a smart guy at the local mosque. It outlines a hierarchy of the blessed.
Right. So what does this all mean for the hierarchy of these guys? Who exactly are we supposed to be looking for?
Well, the source pulls from a famous Quranic verse that identifies 4 specific categories of people who have received divine favor and walk the ultimate straight path. The 4 are the prophets, the Siddiqin, the Shuhada, and the Salihin.
Let's break down the mechanics of each, because this is where the text gets really descriptive about how spiritual energy is actually transmitted. Starting with the prophets.
Within this theological framework, the prophets are the ultimate perfect guides. They are the individuals who receive direct divine revelation. They are the source of the spring, so to speak.
If there's a catch, right?
Yeah, the text notes a critical theological boundary. The era of prophethood has ended with Prophet Muhammad. There are no more prophets coming. So the direct physical source of that specific divine light is no longer walking the earth.
Which creates a massive logistical problem. If the sun has set, how do we see? And the text answers this with the second category, the Siddiqin. These are the immensely truthful, the steadfast affirmers of truth.
And the primary historical example the text gives is Abu Bakr, the closest companion to the prophet.
The terminology used here is fascinating. It describes Abu Bakr as a mirror of prophethood.
What's fascinating here is how the text describes the transmission of spiritual light. It's a vital metaphor. If you want to see the sun, but it has set below the horizon, you look at the moon. The moon doesn't generate its own light. It perfectly reflects the sun.
Right, it's a reflection.
Exactly. The text describes the transmission of spiritual knowledge from the prophet to Abu Bakr not as a transfer of data, but as a transfer of a state of being. It says the knowledge was poured from chest to chest.
Chest to chest. That implies something deeply nonverbal. It's emotional resonance. It's like mirror neurons firing. It's not a professor handing you a syllabus. It's being in the presence of someone so calm, so grounded, that your own nervous system literally regulates itself to match theirs.
That's a great way to put it.
And the text argues that Abu Bakr polished the mirror of his heart so completely, meaning he eradicated his own ego entirely, that he perfectly reflected the prophet's light to the next generation without distorting it at all.
That is the exact mechanism of the Sufi path. The light remains unbroken. It simply bounces from polished mirror to polished mirror across the centuries.
That is incredible. Then we have the third category, the Shuhada, the martyrs. Now, usually the word martyr evokes physical combat, someone dying on a battlefield for a cause. But the text seems to be expanding that definition a lot.
Vastly expanding it. While physical martyrdom is acknowledged, the spiritual context here refers to the greater jihad, the internal struggle.
The internal struggle against what?
Against the self. The Shuhada are those who have completely slaughtered their own desires, their own ego, and their own will for the sake of the divine. It is the death of the self before physical death.
That is an intense way to live. To wake up every day and intentionally assassinate your own urge to be praised, your own urge to be superior.
And because they have sacrificed their ego, they become safe harbors for others. They are qualified to guide because they have no ulterior, self-serving motives left.
Which brings us to the fourth category, the Salihin, the righteous.
The Salihin are the individuals who have successfully undergone the medical procedure of the soul. They have been cured of internal spiritual diseases.
And the text is incredibly specific about what constitutes a disease here. We aren't just talking about outward, obvious sins like theft or violence. We are talking about the silent killers, arrogance, malice, jealousy, and a concept they call hidden polytheism, or Riya.
Right, Riya is a huge focus.
Unpack hidden polytheism for me, because polytheism usually means worshiping multiple statues or gods. How is it a hidden disease of the heart?
In this psychological framework, hidden polytheism means you are performing a good deed, But instead of doing it purely for the divine, you are doing it for an audience of humans.
Ah, okay.
You are worshiping their praise. You want them to see how pious you are, how generous you are. The ego sneaks into the holy act and corrupts it. The Salihin are those who have scrubbed their hearts clean of this. Their internal reality matches their external actions perfectly.
So we have this unbroken chain. Prophets to the Siddiqin, to the Shuhada, to the Salihin. It's a spiritual supply chain.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this explains exactly how the early community was built. It wasn't a mass distribution of literature.
Right. And this raises a massive logistical question, one that actually stopped me in my tracks when I read the source material.
Yeah.
We just established how fragile and easily corrupted the human ego is. If human beings are so messy, why did the Prophet Muhammad rely on this human supply chain at all?
It's a fair question.
He had resources later in his life. He could have built the equivalent of a massive printing press. He could have ordered an army of scribes to write down millions of copies of his teachings and flooded every corner of the globe with perfect, uncorrupted parchment. Why didn't he?
Because, as the text argues, putting perfect words on parchment doesn't create perfect people.
Easter creates paper.
Exactly. The prophet didn't distribute pages, he crafted personalities, he used a methodology called suba.
Suba, which translates to companionship, right?
Yes, companionship, association, keeping company. He didn't just stand at a podium, deliver a lecture, and go home. He lived with them.
They were just doing life together.
They ate together, traveled together, faced existential crises together. Through this deep, sustained proximity, he molded individuals like Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali, Salman, and Bilal. The text uses a stunning phrase here. He painted them with a divine spiritual color, known as Sibghatullah.
Sibghatullah, the dye of God. I love this metaphor because if you want to understand what the color red looks like, reading a physics textbook about the wavelength of red light won't help you at all. You have to experience the color.
Right, reading about it is useless.
And if you want a piece of cloth to be dyed red, you can't just read the recipe to the cloth. You have to physically submerge the cloth into a vat of boiling red dye. The companionship, the suba, was the vat. By submerging themselves in his presence, these companions became the living, breathing, walking explanations of the text.
The text is unambiguous about this. Books show you the path, they're the road signs, but the soul of the religion, the actual transformative energy, is only transmitted through the gaze and the companionship of a realized master.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Does this mean the text implies that reading the Quran without observing a living master is essentially missing the point?
It argues exactly that. Without seeing the perfect model, acting out the knowledge in real time in messy, unpredictable human situations, acting on the knowledge yourself is practically impossible.
Think about this in a totally secular context for a second, you listening. Imagine trying to learn deep empathy from a PDF document.
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Right. You can download a 10-point checklist on active listening. You can memorize the phrases, I hear what you're saying, or that sounds really difficult. But until you sit in a room with a master therapist or a deeply empathetic friend, and you physically feel the way they hold space for you.
The micro-expressions on their face.
Yes. The micro-expressions, the way their tone shifts, the silence they allow to hang in the air. You don't actually know what empathy is. It's a lived somatic experience. It is caught, not taught. The text insists that conquering your own ego works the exact same way.
Caught, not taught. Exactly. The scholars who only memorize the books possess the form of the religion. They know all the rules. But the murshids, the guides who have undergone suba, possess the essence, and you need the essence to enact real change.
Now, I can imagine someone listening to this and thinking, okay, this mentorship stuff, this find a spiritual master idea, this is probably just necessary for the layperson. The average citizen who doesn't have the intellectual horsepower or the time to decipher complex theology and ancient Arabic grammar.
That's a very common assumption.
But the text gives a shocking historical example to prove the exact opposite. It argues that the smarter you are, the more you need a guide.
Yes, the text brings in the ultimate case study to dismantle the arrogance of the intellect, and that is Imam al-Ghazali. If there is one figure in history who proves that brain power alone cannot save you, it is him.
Paint the picture of Ghazali for us. Just how big of a deal was he?
We are talking about the late 11th century, the absolute peak of the Islamic Golden Age. Ghazali was essentially the Einstein, Aristotle, and Aquinas of his era, all rolled into one single human being.
Wow. Okay, so a heavy hitter.
The heaviest. He was bestowed the title Hujjat al-Islam, which means the proof of Islam. He was a brilliant philosopher, a master theologian, and an unmatched jurist. He was appointed as the head of the Nizamiya in Baghdad, which was the most prestigious university in the world at the time.
So he's at the absolute top of the academic food chain.
He had hundreds, maybe thousands of students hanging on his every word. Kings and viziers sought his counsel. If anyone could have reasoned their way to spiritual perfection through reading and debating, it was Ghazali.
But his towering intellect didn't save him. He hit a massive existential wall.
A profound crisis. Despite his unprecedented success, Ghazali realized he was essentially hollow. He looked at his own heart and realized his intentions were utterly corrupted. He enjoyed the fame, he loved winning the debates, he relished the prestige of being the smartest man in the room.
He had the hidden polytheism.
Exactly. He realized the terrifying truth. Knowing the dictionary definition of humility is not the same thing as being humble.
Right. Knowing the definition of a neurosurgeon doesn't mean you can hold a scalpel without your hand shaking.
So what did this giant of academia do? He walked away, he abandoned his post at the university, gave away his wealth, left his prestige behind, and he submitted himself as an apprentice to the spiritual guides, the Sufis. He swept floors, he sat in silence, he underwent suba.
And the text includes an incredible conclusion from Ghazali after he went through this period of intense spiritual companionship. He returns to society and basically declares, these guys are right. Their path is the absolute correct one.
And the reason he gives is fascinating.
Yeah, he says their internal and external movements are illuminated by the niche of prophethood. What does that mean?
The niche of prophethood is a reference to the famous verse of light in the Quran. What Ghazali is saying is that the actions of these spiritual masters are not derived from clever intellectual deduction. They aren't sitting around theorizing what the right thing to do is.
It's not a computed response.
No. Their actions flow naturally from a direct, inherited spiritual light that traces back to the prophet. It's an organic state of being.
But wait, does this mean the text is anti-intellect? Is it saying that being smart is actually a disadvantage?
Not at all. The intellect is a vital tool, but it is just that, a tool. The danger is that the ego can hijack the tool. This raises an important question about the limits of human intellect. The text uses Ghazali to illustrate a universal law. The intellect alone cannot conquer the ego because the ego uses the intellect as its defense attorney.
Oh, that is devastating. The smarter you are, the better your ego gets at rationalizing its own arrogance.
Exactly.
You know the exact right theological or philosophical terminology to use to look enlightened while secretly feeding your own superiority complex. You can weaponize your intelligence to fake humility flawlessly.
Precisely. And that is why Ghazali admitted that even if all the smartest philosophers and scholars gathered together to try and improve the character and methods of these unlettered spiritual masters, they couldn't add a single thing.
Not a single thing.
Nothing. Ghazali had to put down his massive library and sit at the feet of living masters because it requires a light from outside the intellect to finally subdue the ego.
It takes incredible humility for an academic giant like Ghazali to admit that his vast library of knowledge wasn't enough to cure his heart. Okay, so we've looked at this from the ivory tower. We've seen how the ultimate academic elite needed companionship. But the text doesn't just stay in the realm of high philosophy.
No, it gets very grounded.
It connects this concept of Suba to a very visceral, gritty, street-level story. A story that demonstrates how simply moving toward righteous company literally alters your cosmic destiny. It is the story of the 99 murders.
It is one of the most striking prophetic traditions, or hadiths, cited in the source. It perfectly encapsulates the eternal command to be with the truthful and shows the raw, almost mechanical power of proximity.
Let me set the scene, because it plays out like a dark psychological thriller. There is a man from the ancient Israelites, and he is not just a guy who made a few mistakes. He is a prolific serial killer. He has murdered 99 people.
A completely hardened criminal.
But one day, the weight of his actions crashes down on him. He feels this desperate pang of guilt and a desire to repent. He wants to know if there's any hope for his soul. So he goes to a monk, a devout worshiper known for strict adherence to the rules, and asks, "I've killed 99 people. Can I be forgiven?"
And the monk's reaction is basically what you'd expect.
Right. The monk, who is probably terrified and looking at the world purely through a rigid black and white lens of punitive justice, says, "Absolutely not. You're going to hell." So the man, in a fit of despair and rage, draws his sword and kills the monk, making it an even 100.
It's a tragic demonstration of what happens when desperation meets unguided, rigid piety. The monk had the form of religion, but not the wisdom to handle a volatile soul.
But the killer's desire to repent doesn't die with the monk.
No, he keeps searching. He eventually seeks out a person of true knowledge, a scholar of the heart. He asks the same question. I've killed 100 people. Is there repentance for me?
And the scholar says yes. God's mercy is vaster than your sins. Nothing stands between you and repentance. But, and here is a crucial mechanism, the scholar doesn't just pat him on the back, hand him a prayer book, and say, go home and read this. He gives him a very specific geographic prescription. What does he tell him?
He tells him, leave your land, for it is an evil land. Go to such and such land. There are people there who worship God. Go and worship God with them and do not return to your land.
Leave your environment. Your current orbit is toxic. Go find the righteous people. Seek their suba.
Exactly. The scholar understands that the man's environment is complicit in his behavior. If he stays, his ego and his habits will inevitably pull him back into violence. He needs a new vat to be submerged in.
So the story continues. The man sets out on the journey. He's walking toward the new land. But halfway there, he collapses. Death comes to him on the road. And this is where the text draws its most profound theological insight.
Because he hadn't actually reached them yet.
Right. The man hadn't even reached the righteous people yet. He hadn't sat in their company. He hadn't performed a single new good deed. He hadn't prayed a single prayer with them. He just died in the dirt.
But a dispute erupts over his soul. The angels of punishment arrive and say, he never did a good deed in his life. He's a mass murderer. He belongs to us.
And the other side.
The angels of mercy arrive and argue, no, he came repenting, directing his heart toward the divine. To settle the dispute, God commands the angels to measure the distance between the two lands.
They pull out the cosmic tape measure.
And they find he was closer to the land of the righteous, the land of the Salihin, by just a handspan. Because his physical body was inching toward good company, the angels of mercy take his soul. He is completely forgiven.
It is an unbelievable story. The insight here is staggering. It was the mere intention to seek the companionship of the righteous and the physical momentum toward the murshid that secured his salvation.
It's really powerful.
It reminds me of the proximity effect in modern psychology. You know, the idea that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If your 5 closest friends are cynical and constantly complaining, you will inevitably become the 6th. If your 5 closest friends are marathon runners, eventually you're going to buy a pair of running shoes.
Yeah, it's human nature to absorb the atmosphere around us.
But this text takes that basic psychological principle and elevates it to a matter of spiritual life and death.
It does. It argues that simply entering the gravitational pull of pure people fundamentally alters your spiritual trajectory. The source document uses a brilliant metaphor here, actually. It describes this companionship as an absolute shield against the highway robbers of the spiritual path.
Okay, let's stretch that metaphor. If the spiritual path is a journey, who are the highway robbers?
The ego and Satan. The text argues that trying to travel the path of spiritual purification entirely alone is like walking through a dark, notoriously dangerous forest with all your gold hanging out of your pockets. You are going to get ambushed.
And what are the robbers' weapons? It's not swords. It's whispering self-doubt. It's injecting you with a sudden burst of self-righteousness when you manage to wake up early to pray. It's plunging you into despair when you make a mistake, convincing you that God could never forgive you.
All of that. And the wealth they are stealing is your sincerity.
Exactly. When you are alone, you have no defense against these psychological ambushes. But traveling with a caravan, under the guidance of a master who knows the forest, who knows every trick the bandits use, ensures your safety. The serial killer in the story realized he couldn't fight the bandits in his own mind anymore. He had to physically move his body toward a protected caravan.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Okay, so this all tracks logically. Razi proves our intellect is flawed hardware. Ghazali proves even the geniuses need a software update from a master. The 99 Murders story proves that just walking toward a master saves you from the highway robbers. We need a guide. We need Suba.
Yes, the necessity is established.
But here is the massive unavoidable red flag in the modern world. How on earth do you spot a real one? Because if we look at history, and if we look at the news today, the world is overflowing with fake gurus, cult leaders, charlatans, and narcissists who prey on vulnerable people looking for guidance.
It's a very real danger.
Isn't the idea of completely submitting to a perfect guide the exact blueprint for how a cult starts? How does this text defend against the obvious danger of spiritual abuse?
It is the most critical question you can ask, and the text does not ignore it. In fact, it provides a highly rigorous, specific filter. It gives us what we can call the acid test for identifying a true friend of God, a true wali or murshid.
Okay, so we need a guide. We need this suba. But how do we find them? Let's get into the mechanics of this defense system, because it has to be robust.
The first thing the text does is strip away our fascination with the supernatural. It is adamant that identifying a true guide has absolutely nothing to do with miracles or breaking the laws of physics. It's not about a guy who claims he can levitate, read your thoughts, or manifest wealth.
Charisma and parlor tricks are not proof of spiritual purity. A cult leader relies on spectacle to dazzle you so you stop asking critical questions.
Precisely. To find the real deal, the source quotes a specific tradition where the prophet was asked, who are the best people to sit with? The answer provides 3 non-negotiable conditions.
Okay, what's number 1?
Number 1, seeing them reminds you of God.
Let's really unpack that. Seeing them reminds you of God. It's a phenomenological test. It's about the localized atmosphere they generate. When you sit with a fraud, you notice their expensive watch, their carefully curated aesthetic, or how desperately they want you to think they are profound.
They want all the attention.
Right. But a true murshid's heart is so absorbed in the divine that they act as a transparent window. You look at them, and your focus is immediately deflected through them toward a higher reality. Your own mundane anxieties, your rent, your follower count, your office politics, just sort of evaporate in their presence.
It's a state of profound, contagious tranquility. A charlatan wants you to be obsessed with them. A murshid wants you to be obsessed with the creator. That's the first filter.
I love that. What is the second criteria?
Number 2, their speech increases your knowledge.
Now, in this context, knowledge doesn't mean they can recite Wikipedia articles or impress you with obscure philosophical quotes. Right?
No, it means targeted spiritual medicine. Their speech provides profound insight into the nature of your own self. They aren't just giving generalized motivational speeches or validating your biases to make you like them.
They are just telling you what you want to hear.
Exactly. They are diagnosing your specific spiritual state. A true guide will listen to you talk about your day and gently point out the hidden resentment you are harboring toward your coworker. They increase your knowledge of your own flaws and give you the exact practical steps to cure them.
They act as the neurosurgeon. They find the tumor of arrogance and carefully cut it out. And the third criteria, this feels like the ultimate safety check.
Number 3, their actions remind you of the hereafter.
Their actions remind you of the hereafter. This is the ultimate anti-cult defense mechanism.
It absolutely is. Pay attention to what they do, not what they say. If someone claims to be a towering spiritual guide, but their daily actions demonstrate a desperate obsession with accumulating worldly wealth, fighting for status, arguing over petty politics, or seeking VIP treatment, they fail the test immediately.
They fail instantly.
Right. A true murshid is fundamentally detached. They serve others without expecting anything in return. They are living for the next world, not this one.
This is so remarkably pragmatic. The text explicitly warns against sitting with guides whose hearts are heedless. It's telling you to trust the fruit of the tree. A cult leader uses your devotion to build their worldly empire. The murshid serves you to build your spiritual hereafter.
And if we abstract this out, it's a brilliant filter for everyday life, too. Think about the mentors, friends, or leaders you associate with. If you leave an interaction feeling more anxious about your career trajectory, more envious of other people's money, or more entangled in toxic drama, they are not the guide.
Yeah, that's toxic company.
But if you leave feeling a deep, quiet awareness of your ultimate purpose, a sense of peace, and a genuine desire to be a more patient, loving human being, you've found the right company.
Think about your own life right now, listener. Let's do a thought experiment. Apply this acid test to the people you allow into your mind every single day. Look at the influencers, the thought leaders, the podcasters, the authors you follow right now.
That's a great exercise.
How do you feel after consuming their content? Do they pass this test of shifting your focus to something higher, or do they pull you deeper into the noise and the anxiety of the algorithm? Does their speech actually increase your wisdom about your own flaws, or do they just feed your outrage and tribalism?
It is a profoundly sobering exercise when you apply it to our modern media diet. The text strongly suggests that bad company, even virtual company, the voices we let into our ears, doesn't just waste your time. It actively darkens your heart. It strengthens the highway robbers.
Which brings us to the end of this incredible journey today. We started with a murky diagnostic landscape, and this text provided a surprisingly rigorous map. Let's trace the arc of what we've uncovered. We started with Imam Razi's assertion that the human intellect is compromised hardware prone to self-deception, which is why raw data and books are insufficient for inner transformation.
Right. And then we explored the hierarchy of the Blessed from the Prophets to the Salihin, and the vital concept that spiritual light isn't a data transfer, but a state of being transmitted from chest to chest, like a perfectly polished mirror reflecting the sun.
We saw how the prophet built his legacy not by printing pages, but by submerging his companions in the vat of his presence, the Suba. We watched the towering genius of Imam Ghazali abandon his university post because he realized intelligence without a master couldn't cure his ego.
We unpacked the visceral story of the 99 murders, realizing that the mere physical momentum toward righteous company can alter the cosmic scales of justice and protect us from the psychological ambushes of the ego.
And we just walked through the acid test. Finding someone whose presence reminds you of God, whose speech diagnoses your flaws, and whose actions prove they aren't trying to build a worldly empire.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave the listener with a final thought, not explicitly covered in the discussion, but building directly on it. If this text is right, and true knowledge is transferred heart to heart rather than brain to brain, it forces us to ask a difficult question.
What are we facing here?
Well, in our hyper-digital age, where we've automated almost every form of learning, we have AI tutors, we have endless online masterclasses, we can download thousands of lectures. Are we inadvertently engineering out the very human connection required to actually become better people?
Are we gaining all the information in the universe but destroying the only mechanism that produces wisdom? That is a haunting thought, because it brings us right back to the hospital room where we started.
Yeah, back to the X-ray.
You can invent the most high-resolution X-ray machine in human history. It can show you every millimeter of a shattered bone in stunning detail. But if you don't have a skilled, living, breathing doctor in the room to look at the scan, to physically set the bone back into place, and to look you in the eye and tell you how to heal, the machine is just a glowing box.
The machine cannot heal you. Only a human being can guide you through the pain of healing.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of the heart. Take a look at the mirrors in your life. Run the acid test. Find the ones reflecting the light and keep seeking those aha moments in your own life. We'll see you next time.